Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna, and welcome also from me. My name is Virginia Mucchi, Head of Outreach and Impact at ECDPM, which is one of the partners of the DYNAMIG conference. What we're starting now is what is called, and everybody here in the bubble knows, a fireside chat, which is a conversation rather than a proper panel on that is meant to be slightly more political than what we've just heard and what we probably will hear for the rest of the day. The reason being that at the heart of the research that DYNAMIG has been conducting is the idea that policies and people's choices are and should be deeply connected. And as with what we heard, probably they're not taken into account as much as they should. One of the key messages, we heard it from Marie-Laurence, and again, I think we'll hear it all the day, is that policymakers need to consider the motivation and the push factors that drive people to migrate when they are making migration-related policies. However, what we've seen is that there are other people that are influencing policymakers and are not necessarily the migrants, but are the voters. And migration has been for a long time already, and probably will continue to be a very politicized and very divisive issue, both within the EU and member states, but obviously also between the EU and partnering and neighboring countries. To discuss these ramifications and political ramifications, I am delighted to have here with me His Excellency Ahmed Réda Chami, Ambassador of Morocco to the EU and NATO, and Francisco Gaztelu Mezquiriz, I hope I pronounce it properly, Director for North Africa of the new-ish MENA DG, Middle East, North Africa and the Gulf at the European Commission. Thank you both for being here with me. What we will look is in the frame of the Europe-Africa and Europe-North Africa relations, we'll look at the broader political context in which migration policies are made. And this will hopefully also help to see how the research that the DYNAMIG team has done will fit into the whole thing. Let's start maybe with you, Ambassador Chami, a bit looking at the state of the relationship. As we heard and as we know, migration is very politically sensitive and a strategically important issue in the EU-Africa relation. How has it influenced the way that Morocco and the EU engage with one another? Well, yeah. Yes, I think.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Hello, everyone. Well, it's obvious that migration is high on the agenda of the EU. Maybe I can say that's maybe the top one, item in the EU, because it's creating so much noise, and politicians use the migration as one of the key topics when they're running for elections in every single country, and not just in the EU. Outside the EU it's also true outside the EU. Not maybe in Africa, but in other countries. Maybe because Africa is one of the continents that will have a migration out, that is bigger than other areas of the world. But it's important also to put some numbers really on this issue so we can understand what we're talking about. If you consider, for example, inside the EU, what is the total population that is born outside the EU, it's 6% of the population, almost 6-7% of the population. If you go to Australia, we're talking about 31%. If you go to Switzerland, we're talking about 31%, 30%. Iceland is really also a big number. So at the end of the day, you might say, well, it's not that much, finally, or maybe the 6% is very high, depending on how you look at it and where you stand. But it's important to compare what's happening in other parts of the world. The other thing that I believe is important for you to understand, and let me break the news to you, Africans don't want to come to Europe. In fact, 85% of the migration is intracontinental. True that 15% go outside Europe, but they go outside Europe because they don't find a decent life, decent job. There are still some wars happening in the region. So if we fix those issues, people will prefer to stay home. And another evidence of this is, for example, in Morocco, we are seeing a lot of Moroccans that had successful careers in different parts of the world that are coming back today to Morocco because there are more opportunities for them. So this is something that is worth mentioning. Another topic that I would love to make is that things that are shaping the relationship between the EU and Morocco, because here I talked about in general. Well, people were crossing Morocco to come to Europe, then now they are staying in Morocco. So we have become a country of destination. And now we have our own strategy for migration, even asylum, since 2014.
But why is there this idea instead in Europe that still numbers are effectively going down, but there's still this idea that numbers are huge?
Well, as you said, the numbers are really going down. And we noticed, for example, in 2024, that there was a decrease by 40% in the Western Mediterranean. I mean, of course, when they come to Europe, they come from the Western Mediterranean, they come from the Eastern Mediterranean, from Central Mediterranean, depends on where you are, but we are doing the job. We as Morocco, and Mauritania is also really involved, and Spain, because we are doing it with Spain. So many migrants are not allowed to go irregularly to France or to Spain first. And of course we'll talk about legal migration later on, but I understand that Europe has to protect its territory from irregular migration, and we understanding that, and it's part of the partnership, the overall partnership, that we do part of the job in Morocco.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting. It's good to put some numbers as well. Maybe Francisco, if I can move to you. Your commissioner presented last week the new pact for the Mediterranean. The focus was clearly, and the desire was to focus primarily on economic, financial, environmental sort of priorities. Migration was somewhat there, obviously, but I would be curious to hear what was the framing really that migration had in the pact, and was it something that was it discussed also with your sort of the other side of the Mediterranean, and how much it played a role?
Out there. Thank you for the invitation. I think first of all to say that I think to have research on what you said on the factors and the reasons, for a migrant to take decision to migrate is extremely important. I think so. We're very interested, in knowing the results of your research, because
we will share them, don't worry.
Thank you. Because it's something we started looking at as well myself, kind of 20 years ago, and then it's something that, at least as far as the Commission is concerned, is an accomplished, if you want, piece of research. Then you told us, Virginia told us before the meeting to disagree. And
of course.
They actually disagree, so the thing is more exciting. So then I will disagree with both of them, with Ambassador and Virginia, okay? Firstly to say, the pact and migration. So you said that the pact is mainly centered on competitiveness and economy. It's not true. The pact is mainly centered on people. That's the main thing we'd like to focus on. At least that was our ambition, our intention.
Well, that's the message.
That was in principle the message. That's what we wanted to say. And this is linked to what we're discussing today, migration. Because we don't look at migration anymore as migration itself, but as people, movement of people, mobility. And of course, you could say there is a bad mobility and good mobility, talking in very silly terms, but you have irregular migration and legal migration, or regular migration. If you look at the pact, we are really very much focusing on developing skills, so making sure, and here we look at it together with our partner countries. So even more maybe with our partner countries, but clearly we are looking at our problems as common challenges. I know it sounds very girl the what you want, but it is we look at it really as a common challenge. So okay, our labor market has to improve in quality on both sides of the Mediterranean, in the Mediterranean itself. And this is one of our focus points. If we succeed in having and developing the skills of our labor markets for the benefit of the domestic markets, our partner countries and the EU markets, I think we have already taken a very good and very important step forward in terms of managing migration as well. Because of course, as part, when you have a very well-trained labor market, and you have labor market needs which are evident on the EU side and on our partner countries side, then of course these people can address the shortcomings of the labor markets, but can also be natural subjects for mobility, because they already, let's say, have the skills, have also probably been trained by common projects, vocational training projects, which are jointly conceived and managed by the EU member states and by our partner countries authorities, with the support of the private sector. This means as well that we need to link investments to the development of skills, and then when these people have been trained, all these skills, which are good for, in this case, Morocco and the EU labor market, they are natural subjects, to mobility. Then of course you have to address a number of issues, such as the visa issues, as well the circular mobility and many other things, but I think this is a little bit the focus of the past, And then when I saw that the ambassador was coming here, for this meeting, I also was a bit surprised, saying, okay, why are we talking about migration? And I was thinking...
I was surprised too. I'm still surprised.
Because
it's a migration conference.
Of course, but then, of course, because our cooperation with Morocco, our partnership with Morocco is much, much larger than migration.
Absolutely. Of course.
For example, I would find it obvious not to discuss about energy, about digital world, about academia, and things like that, and not so much about migration. Because indeed for us, and just I finish with this, migration is really very much streamlined in the way we want to work with our country.
But in a sense, you're doing what the European Commission is meant to do, which is sort of depoliticize the topic, right? And trying to look at how and concrete steps. But effectively, you can't deny that migration has been a big source of friction between the EU and partner countries and neighboring countries on many grounds and for many years. Is there a way of looking at this, and is the pact the solution, but then is it kind of enough to find a way to have a kind of cooperation that looks at migration really like a driver for shared prosperity, like we all hope it could be, rather than a constant source of friction? Because this, frankly, at political level, it still is.
Maybe I can just add one thing to clarify the topic about the migration that is being handled by the EU and Morocco. There is one thing that you didn't mention, and in fact it's there, it's obvious. It's the bilateral relationship.
Yeah.
So when you come at the EU level, well, we're talking about so many different things that are much more positive than just talking about migration. That's why when he talks about energy, it excites me, because we can do so many things on energy. When you talk about talents, about AI tomorrow, about so many decarbonation, these are the topics that are the topics for the future, that are positive for your populations and ours. And the pact is one of the tools, not just the only tool, where we can explore all those issues. But for the migration, it's there, because, EU has also this concern about what to do on an EU level, especially because the different countries want, for example, solidarity when migration happens in Italy, and then the other EU members have also to take it part of the burden, if I can say that. But if you look at the country, for example, in Morocco, we have very strong, partnerships with different countries in the EU, and I talked about Spain. But then we have, for example, the tool for the return of illegal migrants. So, and this maybe we don't have it at the EU level because we already have it at the bilateral level. Yeah. So it's just you can get that. Okay, so now we can move to the second question.
Which was basically how to make sure that migration doesn't always become or is
Okay.
source of friction.
Let me again, I like numbers, you know, I am an engineer, you know, by construction, so, but I'm talking about numbers, of course, it makes sense. Migration, first of all, will increase in the future. There are some very respectable institutions, for example, that are saying that by 2050, 216 million of Africans will be climate migrants. Doesn't mean that they will come here.
No, no, of course.
As I said, 85% already go to. But you know, climate change is impacting, you know, migration inside Africa. Then let's project ourselves in the future, and you know, it's all about demographics. Then demographics will answer, you know, the point that you make. How can we look at it? I mean, if you take 2100, of course I won't be here, but it's just like question of really looking forward. You know, the numbers that are given by the World Bank are saying that Europe will be around 300 million people. Some countries like Italy, like Spain, will halve the population. So you can half of the population. We're talking about net zero migration. Africa will be 4.2 billion. Nigeria itself around 540 million. So, and you take this, you look at the median age. Well, today median age is 42.8, almost 43 here. In Africa is 20. And you look at the challenges on the economy now, because that demographics, well, Africa should create around 20 million jobs a year. Today we are creating 3 million jobs a year. So wow, when you took the demographics, you took the economy needs, and let me take the economy needs in Europe. Who is going to pay the pensions?
Yeah.
Who is going to, you know, develop the industries, the services, and so on? So it's obvious that there must be a match somewhere.
So for you, it's inevitable.
Inevitable that you know, Africa and Europe will cooperate in a very positive manner on the migration. The migration now becomes an opportunity. It's not, you know, just a challenge.
But how do you convince European politicians that this is the case?
Yes, this is the challenge for Europe now. I mean, I think because the numbers that Ambassador is mentioning are absolutely clear. And it's obvious that the demographics with net zero migration are the ones that the Ambassador has just exposed. And I think, you know, it is not bad to be so. Obviously, the net zero migration scenario is not the real one. So migration will continue as well. The countries are taking different strategies as well to improve the demographics. You saw, for example, what President Macron has launched, I think, just yesterday as an idea, and so on and so forth. And there are also other trends. For example, I think there is, the Comité d'Action pour la Méditerranée, I think, which actually is making as well a research on how services delivery and provision could actually be done in third countries. In this case, for example, Morocco, just to say an example. Health services, for example, could be provided in Morocco, as for example is the case for, I don't know, many North Europeans, for example in Spain, Portugal, in other countries. So you could also have this situation where the economic needs, some of the services needs of the Europeans and European Union markets might be provided directly from the countries as well, our partner countries. It means that there are different trends and different economic, you know, dimensions that can, of course, influence these demographic scenarios. But nevertheless, the demographics are there. And the issue in Europe indeed is how illegal migration or urban migration is dealt with, and how this is politically addressed as well, you know. And I think we can all see that sometimes that is not entirely rational, what is going on there, you know.
Sometimes.
Exactly. And I think our job, you know, Morocco, European Union, partner countries, European Union, is to center the debate and to make sure, you know, that it is, as you said, looked at it a little more depoliticized, you know, that indeed nobody, and I was, you know, since I've been working on migration matters as well, or I have been confronted with migration matters already for the 30 last years, I always saw two camps. The camp that wants to protect the migrant at any price, whichever migrant, type of migrant, origin of the migrant, so on and so forth, and the camp that wants to avoid any migrant to come in at any price. And I think none of these perspectives is right. Nobody can be happy about someone migrating regularly to the EU. Neither those who want to protect it, because it's not a good way of protecting someone who comes irregularly. I can tell you, I've had witnesses many cases. And of course, there are people who, even if arrive to Europe successfully, from their perspective, they are in all cases traumatized. A little bit or a lot, but traumatized.
But how do we convince politicians for the third way? This is to be on a third camp, which is the middle camp.
Which is
that doesn't seem to be very popular these days.
Yeah, but I think we need to be firm and clear about that.
It happens.
Yeah, where?
I mean, take Italy, for example. Before Madame Meloni came, I mean, it was obvious that migration was such a bad thing. When she came, I think she legalized more migrants than any previous government.
Yeah, but
so
the rhetoric is still very anti, though, no?
So the point is, Madame Merkel, when she was in charge, really, she brought 1.3 million affections, if I remember correctly. It created a lot of problems. And maybe the biggest challenge you guys will have is the cultural adaptation.
Yeah.
That's really the main
integration
challenge that you have. Yeah. Integration. Well, integration, adaptation. You have to also to adapt.
Food. Yeah.
Okay, it's just not that they have to integrate. Yeah. So that's really the main challenge that will be there. Because which is less. Which is, for example, in Morocco, we do have some problems with the. I told you that we have legalized 50,000 migrants that wanted to stay in Morocco because they found it, I would say, interesting for them to stay. They had a job. We opened to them the schools, health centers, the health system. But at the end of the day, you still have sometimes some frictions with Moroccans who are Africans. And that's why when you think about those people coming, you better have great, planning to not to have these people live just all together in one certain point, in one location. So you have to make sure that you take that into account so they can really integrate and they adapt to you and you adapt to them.
Yeah, but if I may say, sorry, on Italy, it's true that the government has increased the number of legal migrants, but the narrative and the message out there is still incredibly against migration and against irregular migration and kind of with the boats and all the seas that we've seen on the Mediterranean constantly. So she has been doing it a bit below the radar. Which is the only way to do it, it seems to be, because otherwise, so it means that people, and this is where at the end of the day, what we're talking about is this balance between people that want to have a better future, and especially young people that want to move and want to work elsewhere, but also people that are asking their government to say, okay, you need to keep control here because we feel out of control. And so there is a clash there, and the point is, how are we actually gonna find the right balance?
It's not by rhetoric that we're going to address this issue, and this is linking to what you said, is we need to develop the third message, which exists, which maybe sometimes is done under the radar screen, but should be really over the radar screen. So we have to be very clear and firm about the possibility of doing both things, really addressing regular migration and investing much more and much more intelligently in other things, like, for example, integration, legal migration, and opportunity. And again, this is for sure central to the pact. You look at the pact, it's precisely what we're trying to convey as a message. And there is a chapter in the pact about hard migration, border miles, and so on and so forth. Of course, it takes its place, because it needs to take its place. But I think we need to be very clear. We're not clear enough and firm enough, if you want, about this third message that I'm talking about. I'll sound a little bit like Tony Blair 30 years ago, but this third message that we need to talk about. Just one point that's all about, because I think maybe something about Morocco or partner countries in the EU in general, because some people still might believe that we are kind of two sides. But the reality is that the challenges, of course, Ambassador knows that much better than I do, the challenges that Morocco is being confronted with in the area of migration are very, very similar to the EU.
Yeah.
Indeed, the demographics are slightly different now, and so on and so forth, but they are very, very similar. It's not only about regular migration, it's not only about it's protection, it's integration, it's smuggling, all this, the same main dimension that we're always talking about. And indeed, I mean, I have also Moroccan friends here, and Moroccan friends basically are coming back to Morocco because the opportunity in Morocco is as well increasing very much as well. You know? So it's, all these dynamics have to be looked at, jointly. 5 minutes left, okay. Yeah. Just one more thing, as well the demographics are changing in our partner country, in the North African countries. The other day I was looking at Egypt. Of course, now there's a huge amount of young people coming to the labor market, but in 30 years, 40 years' time, the situation is going to be as well very difficult in some of our partner countries in terms of demographics, because the number of children is also being reduced dramatically. So again, sorry.
Yeah.
No, there is just, because we looked at migration from the EU's point of view. But let's talk about it from the Moroccan's point of view, or from any other southern Mediterranean, country. If you don't like illegal migration, which I understand, you love chosen migration, which you might hate. So let me put it, if it's not controlled. That's what we call brain drain.
Yeah.
If the state of Morocco has put a lot of money to train doctors, and at the end of the day doctors go to Germany or somewhere else, then we have a problem, because we have under-investment in the medical field, and we have kids going into the street, just like what happened, because they believe that the health system is not working well. So that's why when we talk about migration, and I explained that our future is linked, is intertwined, you and us, but we have to, if you need people to come, then we have to put in place some very, processes that will allow it to be a win-win situation.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what you want to talk about at the last question.
Well, I guess we have very little time left, but I'm wondering, the brain drain is also a problem, let's say, in Italy, frankly, already with the rest of the EU. So it is exactly. Yes. So it's not is a problem that goes both ways. But the question, perhaps, and coming from this third way element, so would you have to have then courageous and perhaps right politicians, but also on the spectrum that has been traditionally anti or more against migration, be more open about why they're doing it, because that would be one way of convincing. At the end of the day, you need to convince your people, because and if you are so scared of voters, you need to say what voters want to hear. So
yeah. And politicians, normally they should be courageous and lead the way.
Yes.
That's the way it should happen. And they have some ammunition that this gentleman and myself can give them.
And
which are very successful programs that are beneficial both to Morocco and to the EU. I'm talking about Templos, for example, and the talent program, where basically we're taking some industries like tourism and saying hospitality, this is what the need of Europe is. This is what we can provide. Let's have funding from the EU to train them. Let's have them, go to Europe and then come back. That's circular migration. We have another one that is called Wafira, with the Spanish people, where basically during the summer they don't have people to harvest the strawberries, for example, or anything else. So we are scaling up. It worked really nicely. 250 women before coming from rural area. Now we are going to 3,000 people. So they are, very good examples, very successful stories that can be taken as a model.
And should be probably communicated more broadly.
Absolutely.
Would you want the last?
Just very quickly, it does not only belong to politicians, it belongs to all of us. All of us to really pass the message, all of us to communicate on this, all of us to work on this. You are researchers, you are academia, you are communicators, so we need all of us to do the message. President von der Leyen, the Commission is fully behind the pact. The message of the pact is precisely that, if you look at it. So politicians are taking already this third way forward. But more than words, we need action. Exactly what the ambassador was talking about now. We have seen some areas very successful actions, successful things that have happened. We need really to scale them up. Also, the pact is about scaling them up, please. One last word for the ambassador. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's great discussion. At the end of the day, also, of course, Africa has to do its part. I mean, if we want to create a bright future for the people, we need to do it in Africa first before they have to move to Europe. But Europe also has to understand that it needs to help creating wealth outside Europe. If you don't want all these people to come to Europe, then you need to have a strong southern part of the Mediterranean where there is wealth created, and that can be also something that where EU can help.
Indeed, and I guess this is partly what also the Pact and
Yes.
generally Global Gateway is looking at. I think we have no more time, so I want to thank my my panelists here, and I hope to, yeah, have an interesting. Thank you so much.